Today we're going to have a discussion on dangerous game scopes. This is one of those funny subjects that for some reason I seem to be on the outside of all conventional wisdom. Although I've found some support in some circles for what I've found that works better for me. So what I want to talk about is what is a dangerous game scope? What is the conventional wisdom on that subject, and why? Why is there conventional wisdom on this subject? This may be one of those that kind of steps on some people's toes, and I'm sure it will, because it seems to be that there is conventional wisdom that is cemented firmly in the Africa hunting crowd when it comes to dangerous game scopes. So I want to talk today about the 3 dangerous game scopes that I have, the ones that I've used, the ones that I've hunted with, and what I have found in my own personal hunts to be the pros and cons. And then we'll back that up with some other commentary. The first one I ever bought was this Leupold VX6, so it's very good glass. It is going to be 1 to 6 by 24 millimeter. So this is what is commonly referred to as the classic quote-unquote dangerous game scope. Small 24 millimeter objective tube, very much a dedicated scope for very close range, having wide field of view all the way down there at 1 power, so that it's quite open and almost like having open sights. These typically come with a heavy duplex reticle in them. This one has, like all of mine, it's going to have a lighted reticle. I personally do not hunt with scopes that don't have a red dot incorporated into them. But what we want to talk about, what is the pros and the cons with this scope? And I think it's very simple. This thing is very good for one thing and one thing only, and that is shooting a very, very large animal at very close range. It doesn't have the magnification or the light gathering ability to be a scope to shoot for further ranges. So you're very much dedicated to what you're doing if you have this scope. That's one I started with and I hunted with, and I got along okay as long as I was on that particular kind of hunt. It wasn't a whole lot of fun sighting in, but when you're shooting your big bore calibers like that was on, that was okay. It was good enough. Then my next foray into dangerous game scopes was actually this other Leupold here, this VX6. It's going to be the 2 to 12 by 42, and this scope has served me well and is very versatile. This scope down at 2 power, you're going to be able to see the iron sights. It's such a wide field of view. So maybe not as wide as some others, but wide enough that I can see my front sight quite easily. But yet be able to take this scope and hunt plains game and other things at quite a bit of distance. Hunting even a leopard or something, this VX6 glass is very good. It's very clear. And this thing with the red dot in there is going to be great for your low light conditions. But again, when comparing to what they want to call the classic dangerous game scope, this scope here is much more versatile. It'll do what you need to do with that 40-yard shot at a buffalo, but yet it'll reach out there and you can hunt impala for leopard bait at 200 yards with no problem at all. Then come along a few years later, I wound up with the Swarovski Z8. This is going to be 1.7 to 13.3 by 42. And this is also illuminated with a red dot and then a red circle dot. So the actual illuminated reticle for really close range. So this scope I find to be the absolute best dangerous game scope you can buy. It's certainly the best glass, being a Z8, and you're going to pay for that. Unfortunately, glass is one of those things that there's no substitute. The better glass costs more money. They can put all the coatings and things they want on cheaper glass, and there's no cutting corners there. There's other scopes you can get by with, but this one is the best. Down there around that 1 power mark, you're as just wide a field of view almost as anything on the market. But then you go on up to the, you know, the higher end of the magnification, and you're going to be able to do almost anything that, and in my case, this would be on like a 375. This scope will keep up with anything that 375 can do. I also love this, some of the features of this scope. This switch to be able to turn the red dot on and off. You've got a day setting and a night setting, so kind of dim and brighter, but then of course fully adjustable between that red dot and then the circle dot. I really like that. You can take the turret on and off these Swarovskis with just a push of a button, so however you want to do that. But the key to these is they're locking turrets that if you wanted to be able to dial the scope, which would probably not be something you'd want to do, but you might, you can lock that dial where it's just not going to have a chance of moving. So that's my point always on scopes and turrets, is that you have one that locks, because if you don't, every time you pick up that gun, you've got to look and see where you're at, and that worries me. I've had a lot of people hunting with me, getting in and out of the truck, they spin the turret, and then obviously they've lost their chance at their animal. But anyway, this is the best scope you can buy. I would challenge anyone to come up with a reason why that there's actually a better one. I don't think there is. It's still fairly lightweight, and just much more versatile than what conventional wisdom calls a classic, quote-unquote, dangerous game scope. And you know, a lot of times in these videos, you know, I'm giving you my opinion, but that opinion is based on things that have happened to me, hunts that I've been on, the good and the bad, the experience of other folks hunting with me, alongside me, and how their hunt has gone. So that's the point in these videos, is to be able to share experiences and to be able to help you to make a better decision. Some other points about scopes is, we discussed a little bit, is first of all, I would say quick release mounts are another conventional wisdom item, so to speak, for these scopes. For me personally, I highly recommend that if you're going to use quick detachable scope rings, that you work with them. Make sure they actually work. Make sure they'll actually go back to zero. The only one that I have found that truly goes back to zero is the rail mount on the European rifles like the Blaser R8, in combination with these Swarovski scopes and other European scopes. That one certainly goes back to zero on and off quickly. But the argument always is that you want to have quick detachable scope rings, because if something happens to your scope and you're in a dangerous situation with a buffalo hunt or something like that, folks, I've never once heard of somebody wanting to actually needing to take their scope off for any reason. It just doesn't happen. Maybe it happened once, long ago. I actually, with the conventional quick detach rings, have had more trouble on this particular rifle getting off with travel, the scopes being off. With the Swarovski rail mount, I've never been off more than a click or two in all the travels that I've done. This particular setup right here with this Ruger and this Leupold VX6 been off 8-10 inches one direction and 6-8 inches another direction. So very problematic. I've done away with those. These are regular rings. I'm done with quick detachable rings. I won't be using them anymore unless it's the ones that on our Swarovski and Blaser rifles. Spoke about the red dot. Again, whatever scope you might want to use for a dangerous game scope, I would want to know what my options were. To me, a red dot is a must. You're going to be early, late, low light. But again, think about what options are out there. This is one of those that, with the circle dot and the red dot, is just a different animal. I mean, it's so cool, the features that are in this scope. So that's something to just play with and learn about and decide what you think might work best for you. Another thing that comes up when we're talking about shooting big calibers with scopes is eye relief. And I've heard some people discussing this subject and wanting to make sure they got the scope with the absolute maximum eye relief. And we all know what comes up when this subject is being discussed, and that is being scoped, getting, whether it be eye or whatever people want to call it, the recoil causing the gun to jump and actually cutting your eyebrow. I would counter on that subject that is more a factor of gun fit, getting your length of pull done right, having a gunsmith fit you. This one has some spacers in it like all of my guns do. And you know, knock on wood, I've never ever been scoped by a rifle. And I've shot all kinds of calibers on up into the big bores, not just 375s, 416s of several varieties, and on up the scale. And so I think that it's more of, most of our better scopes have good eye relief. And so I don't find that to be as big a concern as some others, but I think it is the fit of the gun, your length of pull being correctly fitted on that rifle, that's the key. We've talked about red dots and reticles, also just the reticle itself. You know, there's so many options on those today. Look at what's available. The next thing we're going to discuss is those in these dangerous game scopes that have just the extremely thick crosshairs that make it difficult to make a precise shot at distance. Another one of the failings of this scope, typically. Again, I said being not a fan of these kind of scopes kind of makes me the odd man out in the industry. Well, let me share with you a little bit of support in that respect from Craig Boddington, who, like a lot of other very well-known hunters and writers, has written into Robin Hurt's book, A Dangerous Game, which is an incredible resource with some great stories and a very interesting dynamic as you go from chapter to chapter, because it's liable to be a different person writing about a different part of Africa. But in this book, A Dangerous Game, Craig Boddington is talking about this very subject, and he states that the classic scope on a 375 is something on the order of 1.75 to 5 power, or perhaps 1 to 6, a quote-unquote dangerous game scope with a straight objective, like we have started off here discussing. The straight objective cannot gather as much light as a scope with a larger objective lens. He goes on to discuss a 1.75 to 5 power that he used for crocodile, and he says, "We managed a miraculous stalk to 80 yards. The croc was in shallow water. Brain shot was the only option." Wow, even at that distance, I didn't have enough magnification. The intersection of the crosshairs covered everything. I needed, everything I needed to hit, sorry. All I could do was get steady and move the scope up, down, sideways, and back until I was sure of the target. This exact same scenario happened with a dangerous game scope, quote unquote, small objective, huge, thick crosshairs to a friend and client of mine just last year. Same exact scenario, hunting buffalo. I thought this scope would be the way to go. Well, got a buffalo, got a few other things, then wanted to go for a croc, walk and stalk, just like Craig Boddington mentions in this book here, A Dangerous Game, and has the same scenario, winds up, in this case, wounding a croc and having it get away because he didn't have the right scope. He didn't have the quality crosshairs and quality magnification that he needed to be able to make that shot. So as we begin to summarize this whole discussion of dangerous game scopes, I think we need to get away from conventional wisdom. Look at what's available on the market and come handle some of these scopes. Come visit somebody like myself and come out and look at some of these scopes and see what they're like. Maybe even come out and shoot some of the guns that they're connected to, regardless of which kind of mounts that we've chosen to use. I'm just wanting to share all of this with you because basically I found a better way. I found a better way than hunting with this scope. Cost a little bit more, but if you take a look at some of these others, I think you're going to be more versatile. You're going to have the opportunity to hunt that buffalo in thick brush just as well, be able to hunt, take a quality shot on an elephant or whatever the big game you might want to hunt. But then on the other hand, be able to hunt a Dyker or a Croc or an Impala or anything at distance with these other scopes. Well, I hope this at least will, begin some discussion amongst some of you. Some of you may be totally angry with me and say, no, that's not a dangerous game scope. You can only have the tiny objective, or it's not a dangerous game scope. Well, let's just continue that discussion and continue that another day.